Welcome to the Self-Control Show, a podcast for men. If you get defensive, shut down, or find yourself going 0 to 100, you're in the right place. Most men were never taught how to regulate their emotions. And this show is about changing that. It's not therapy, and it's not fluff. It's training. I'm your host, Jason Schnitzer. Let's get to work. What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the show. And today we are going to ask ourselves maybe a funny question, but a serious one. And that is, would you want your daughter to marry you / date you? And what I mean by that is eventually one day when your kids grow up, they're going to bring home probably somebody that they are interested in romantically. And what I mean by the question is, and before you answer, yeah, of course, it doesn't mean that gentleman will be you in all of your great traits, all the things that you really love and are proud of yourself for. It's the good, the bad, and the ugly. And it comes as a whole package. And the question is meant to begin a little self-reflection, right? On not only like your patterns and your behaviors and how you talk to yourself, but how you treat their mother, how you show up in difficult times, how you show up when moments are tense. And the reason why you need to ask yourself this question and really reflect on it until you can truly say yes to that answer is because, oh, well, it all boils down to the things that we talk about on this show, week after week. And that is the state that your nervous system is in gets passed on as basically what to look for in a significant other for your kids, right? Now, obviously, this can work in the opposite way, in that, if things are so bad, it's like, I definitely don't want that, right? But typically, how it works is there's a big part of unconscious selection that happens when we're dating somebody or when we're considering dating somebody, what we're attracted to, what we're not attracted to. All that stuff gets wired into us from an early age. And the main reason why this is such an important question to consider is ultimately your nervous system chooses into what's familiar rather than what's good for you. How many times have you or somebody that you know dated somebody, been in a relationship with somebody where, there was maybe obvious red flags about who the person was, what their behavior was, etc. And you or the person that's dating that's not you in the relationship just couldn't see it, right? And it wasn't until after you got out of the relationship that you look back and you're like, whoa, man, I can't believe I didn't see that, right? Or I can't believe they didn't see that. And seemingly enough, oftentimes you just get right back into another relationship with the same type of person, right? See this time and time again. And there's biology at play there, right? People are attracted to things, and a lot of times they don't know why. And a big part of that is again, the conditioning that they had when they grew up, right? So, for example, if you are caring and loving most of the time, right? But then out of nowhere, when, your kid does something that is just normal for a kid to do, but for whatever reason, you lose your patience, and then all of a sudden a different version of you shows up. What that does for a kid is it's like, whoa, that's big, that's scary, that's something that they don't understand. They can't put two and two together, like, oh, dad had a hard day, so he's a little more on edge today. So my normal giggling, playing, roughhousing, whatever it is, being loud, put him over the edge. Of course, yeah, okay, I should mind myself and be a little quieter today because dad's having a hard time. No, they don't do that. Like, whoa, what did I do that was bad that made dad get upset or lose his cool or yell at me, right? And for a kid, their biggest fear is loss of connection, right? And if something like that happens, they don't know to just be like, again, dad's having a bad day, right? A rough day at work, or maybe you lost a client, or, you know, people really got on his nerves or he didn't have good sleep, etc., or he's got a big project coming up, they don't even think about that. What happens is they make it about them, right? They're like, man, what did I do that made dad so upset, right? And depending on how many times that happens, more and more what tends to happen is their focus comes off of, learning how to regulate themselves, learning that, like, hey, I can be disappointed and upset and everything's going to be okay afterwards, right? They become focused on and worried about, ooh, when dad's upset, I need to like really tighten things up, you know, and be a really good kid. And, that way dad doesn't get upset because that is big and scary, right? So there's this like wiring that goes into their system that's like, hey, when somebody's big, loud, and upset, it becomes my responsibility to make it better, right? Because, dad's disappointed in me. He's asked me so many times, I'm not doing it right. Why can't I do this thing that dad expects me to do, even though I'm a kid? And it's like, how can he really expect me to do that? Right? They don't have a prefrontal cortex, so their impulse control and their ability to follow through is just mush, right? Again, over time, what happens is like they forego kind of like discovering what they want and need, and they start worrying about what you want and need more so than themselves. And where do you think that pattern and how do you think that pattern replays itself? Well, it plays itself in an adult relationship, right? Where, I mean, more or less, they can turn into a people pleaser, right? And what that looks like is they're less focused on what they want and more focused on what you want or the other person wants and needs. And when there's a breakdown in the relationship, or there's a fight, or there's a tiff, there isn't a sense of like, like they didn't handle that right, right? I'm not sure I'm really comfortable with them like really losing their cool out of nowhere like that, right? That's not where they go to, because what feels familiar to them is when things go awry and they don't know why, they can't really understand it. They go to fix mode, right? They default to their factory settings, which is, oh my gosh, the person that I really care about and I'm learning to rely on and I'm starting to like develop feelings for and a connection for, like the connection is at risk because they're not happy, right? And what did I learn to do? I learned that I need to be a certain way to make it better. And my needs stop really mattering until I fix this problem, right? And that can lead to a wide array of issues in a relationship, right? Dynamically speaking, right? When you think about, and this isn't just for girls, by the way, it can happen in boys too, right? You've heard of the nice guy, you've heard of the people pleaser, right? A lot of times they'll say yes when they mean to say no, and they basically sacrifice who they are to make the other person happy, which ultimately what that leads to is just resentment, right? And the slow erosion of a marriage. And then, you know, your son's wife begins to lose attraction because he doesn't have a backbone, right? He doesn't want to stand up for what he believes in because he never learned how to do that. All he learned to do was to behave, right? And not to rock the boat and to make sure that things didn't get too out of hand at home. And, again, same goes for girls and your daughter getting into a relationship with somebody who's loud, right? Not because that's what you want, it's just because that's familiar. And your nervous system chooses into what is familiar because it sees that as safe versus something that's unfamiliar. Because quite honestly, that's dangerous, right? Even if it's good for you. That's why a lot of times, for example, when everything's good and you're like, wow, things are really good. What's the first thing that happens for a lot of people is start thinking about like what could go wrong, right? It's a little too good. And sometimes that gets called and labeled like self-sabotage, limiting beliefs, etc. When really it's your system just not okay with like having more than enough, right? Or having peace. Peace can feel unsettling if it's not the norm and you didn't grow up with the norm. And that takes some rewiring to be able to like let in the calm, right? And ultimately, what we are doing, whether you know it or not, and hopefully this podcast is shedding a little more light on how this works, is you're programming your kids' factory settings. You're programming what it is that they are going to expect in somebody else. And when those factory settings are like, hey, sometimes it's good and sometimes it's not, and when it's not, I don't know. When I don't know, it's my job to like make it better and to fix it. Well, can you see now how that's just like a recipe for a toxic relationship, right? When maybe they really know deep down that it's not okay and that they should leave, but like on some hand, it like when they go about getting to that thought, it's like it always comes back to them. Like, yeah, but this is really my fault, right? And they can't see it clearly when certain emotional grievances are actually the other person's responsibility, right? In a relationship, you're not going to feel good sometimes, and neither is the other person. You're going to disagree. And we all want our kids to be able to be like, this is how I feel, regardless of how it's going to make you feel, because you don't want to like be hiding the truth from your partner, right? But that's not an option that they're going to default to in those hard moments. They're going to default to like, oh no, here it is again. I'm going to have to fix this. How do I fix this to make it better? Because I don't like it when it's not better. And I also am like not sure when it's going to come next, right? So if you lose your cool and you don't have patience, or your patience is thin, or it's easy to be patient at work but then hard at home, or easier at work and harder at home, this is like what you are, I mean, hard truth, but this is like what you're setting your kids up for in their future relationships if you don't learn how to regulate your own emotions so that you can see that reaction coming and it doesn't just take over in the moment. Because over the years, time and time again, you're programming their settings, right? Eventually you're going to see it in like, their faces. You're going to feel bad after a blow up going 0 to 100. And ultimately what typically happens is like then all of a sudden they start going to mom instead of dad because, you know, maybe they even say like, hey, I don't feel quite as safe with dad. And the truth is that you're missing skills, you're missing tools, you're missing understandings to be able to navigate hard moments, right? To regulate hard moments and not go to certain places. Because, yeah, sure, yelling and raising your voice can work in the moment, but again, you're leaving a lasting impression and you're setting their factory settings that, like, hey, people that love me yell at me. And that will 100% absolutely translate into a romantic relationship. And you want the threshold and the tolerance levels to be very, very low for your kids when they get into a relationship for tolerating bad behavior and for tolerating, toxic patterns. And that starts with you, dude. If this is you, I mean, this is exactly what, again, we talk about on the show, what I coach on. And as always, I offer a free call to get to know me, for me to get to know you, to see if we might be a good fit to coach together. So feel free to tap the link in the information, in the show notes below, the summary, and we'd love to connect. Thanks for listening, guys. Catch you on the next one.